everybody, Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa today. I've got Gary Arfsten and Tony Van Goor of Delta Breeze Broadcasting. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Doing well, Mike.
Very well.
Good to see you.
Good. I wanted to do a kind of different type of show today and go into some background about a new radio station in Contra Costa County, KLSN, and just kind of go over the history and some of the controversy going on right now. Gary and Tony were very instrumental in bringing this channel out to Oakley, Brentwood area. Tony, for you, I know you wanted a community radio station and you put in a ton of time a few years ago, and you were operating on a really short window.
Yeah.
And what's going on today is there's been a lot of controversial because a radio antenna was placed. I don't know if illegally is the right word, but it probably is.
Difficult for me to describe that circumstance. I'm not completely familiar with what happened with that because, again, I wasn't involved in it. But way back in 2010, the federal government and President Obama actually saw fit to try to reassign frequencies that were being unused in suburban areas, in rural areas, to community organizations to essentially be the voice of a community, to be the voice of an interest, actually to serve underserved areas in radio that really didn't have a radio station of their own. This was the Local Community Radio Act of 2010. I heard about it and thought, you know, there are roughly 120,000 people in the immediate East Bay area, and there's no radio broadcast service here at all other than what we can get from outlying towns, from Vacaville, from Stockton and the like. It would be very, very uncommon to hear anything about Brentwood news, to hear anything about Oakley news, on anything, any radio broadcast media whatsoever. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get a frequency for Oakley and Brentwood. It took a lot of work. We had to put together a business plan. We had to actually develop a nonprofit organization of our own to manage that, and that's where Delta Breeze Broadcasting came from.
And who did you work with during that time period?
Worked with Gary. Gary was very, very instrumental with that, and actually a group of 6 people. We called ourselves the Dirty Half Dozen. And we got together on pretty much a weekly basis and more frequently if necessary to put together various elements of the station, to put together what the board of directors might look like, put together what the station management might look like. And we worked hard. Not only did we do that, but also we went to local community organizations. We went to the chambers of commerce. We went to the city councils. We went to the school districts.
You were everywhere.
We went everywhere to try to promote this. And we found, actually, Mike, the local community reception to this was very good. Well, it's about time that Oakley and Brentwood got a radio station and did something to really give the community a voice, to really give us some local presence, to really talk about what's happening around here. The requirement of the FCC, however, was that any nonprofit organization that actually held the construction permit that we needed to build the station needed to be in existence for 2 years. And we had to create a new one, and that's where Delta Breeze Broadcasting came from. But we needed some organization to hold the license, or hold the construction permit, if you will, for a couple years until Delta Breeze had been in existence long enough to be able to carry it itself. Jim Frazier at the time was extremely helpful with a nonprofit that he had created called the Friends of Oakley Community Foundation. And the Friends of Oakley Community Foundation, under Jim Frazier's leadership, agreed to hold the construction permit once we got it for 2 years until Delta Breeze Broadcasting could hold it itself and actually be the board of directors of KLSN.
And so here you are 3 years later, still no.
Well, here, actually,
what kind of happened there?
We're going back a ways. Delta Breeze Broadcasting became a corporation back in 2014. Around the time that we got the construction permit from the FCC, February 4th, I remember the day. And we worked hard after that to, again, try to raise community interest. We talked to the school systems. We actually got quite a bit of cooperation and quite a bit of help from Freedom High School to help us with that, to help us.
And you guys actually had an agreement to put an antenna on Freedom High School?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Everything was signed, everything was legal, everything was cleared with everybody to be able to get that accomplished. Again, we were kind of limited. When the frequency for KLSN was allotted, there was only a narrow strip of land actually that could hold a station that it wouldn't interfere with others in the area. Freedom High School and their cell tower was right in the middle of that. And so we talked to the school system, we talked to the superintendent, and their support was outstanding. And we were rolling down the road at that time.
And that would have hit Brentwood, Oakley, and Discovery Bay?
Right. There is a map called a contour map that says quite a bit about the strength of a signal that could penetrate walls and really have good coverage. These radio stations under the Local Community Radio Act could only have 100 watts worth of power, and I think there's many times that in the lights that are glaring on us right now.
We try.
with respect to that.
Blame Michael Pohl.
And so not a very, very strong signal, certainly not a strong stereo signal. But what we found out was that it was strong enough to actually go to the east part of Antioch at the time, all the way over to Discovery Bay, all the way to South Brentwood, and then actually across the San Joaquin and Sacramento River to some degree. We thought, hey, that's perfect. That's exactly the area that needs a radio station. That's exactly the area that we wanted to serve.
So you get that agreement, what happens?
We got the agreement from the Liberty Union School District, and you know, it was kind of baffling to us because we were continuing with our meetings, doing our community outreach, and our board of directors for Delta Breeze Broadcasting, whose name is Bill Woods, we had had some conversations with who is now the project manager at KLSN. His name is Chris Ponsano. He was going out and representing KLSN in a manner that we were not happy with. And Bill actually told Chris to cease and desist.
Yeah, this was always designed from the very, very, very inception of KLSN not to be a money-making organization, not to be a profit organization, because again, it was never our need or desire to make money from this thing. And actually, the FCC was
nonprofit.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit. It's not supposed to. Certainly, if something like this grew in size and there was a need to employ people, that could be done. But the main intent was to serve the community, and it was not at all to make money off advertisers in town and because it can't. We began to get the feeling, though, that the intent, certainly that we were beginning to sense, was not in that direction.
And that's what, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's when it was kind of not really solid with us as far as the support that we were getting from the Friends of Oakley, because at one meeting Chris popped up, and this was after he was instructed not to be going out and representing us, was taking the position as if he was going to change the direction of our station. And it is my belief that between Chris, Kevin Romick, and the Friends of Oakley, they had probably met on the side and had some type of an agreement that at that point he was going to they were going to give the leadership back to Chris. Yeah. And that was not our intent.
There was a meeting that was held, we had periodic meetings for KLSN and Delta Breeze Broadcasting. There was a meeting that was held back in November of 2014 that was actually very pivotal. At the time, of course, I was working full-time. I had a full-time position with a healthcare organization, and I was dealing with some health issues myself. And the burden was becoming very, very overwhelming for me to carry on like that. And I actually approached the board of directors who had attended this meeting for some assistance. You know, well, let's get a national consultant in. I joined the National Federation of Community Broadcasters to help me get guidance to develop this radio station, and they were immensely helpful. One of their main consultants was Donna DeBianco, who actually had been assisting me all along, giving me guidance as to how to do this right. She had, I don't know, maybe tens of dozens of radio stations that she helped to start, just like this.
So from her advice, was there things that the radio station here was doing that they shouldn't be doing?
Not specifically, but there were some additional things that she was saying about community outreach, about getting the community more involved. She had some suggestions. Overall, she was very encouraging, saying the radio station, as Gary and I and the Dirty Half Dozen were developing it, was being done perfectly. Everything was being done right. The business plan was being done correctly. The programming schedule that we were developing was done precisely correctly. She wanted to get more involved to help us with the community outreach and actually getting things going. We also had help from an organization called Nexus Communications to put together, if you will, a radio station in a box.
Sure.
Back at that time, there were a number of companies that actually had all the equipment for a radio station just essentially packaged,
sure,
that we could buy, and I was just about ready to do it, but I wanted the community to contribute to this. You know, not necessarily my own resources, but had we done that, I know that the person who is the present programming director of KLSN said, well, I can get this radio station on the air in 2 weeks. Actually, we could have, instead of the 2 years and 3 months, 2 years and 4 months that it actually took him. We were down that pathway, and we were that close. But the burden became very difficult for me to handle, and actually what I had done is I'd approached the board of directors for help, and their response was not at all, Gary, what I expected.
No, the decision had already been made, in my opinion. One of the things that I would like to make very aware to the community is, in this whole process of getting the construction permit, anything that we had to do that was a financial burden all came from Dr. Tony Van Goor's pocket. Never once did the Friends of Oakley or Chris Ponsano or anybody else outside of our group put any money towards the construction of this radio station. It was all on Tony. And when this whole process was yanked out from underneath us, never once did Tony get a thank you. Never once did he get an offer to be compensated for the funds that he put out. It was just made aware that Tony had basically volunteered his time and money, and that is, in my opinion, completely wrong.
So at that point, you guys had that meeting, and the direction had changed, and then what? From my understanding, lawyers were involved?
Yes, Tony had hired an attorney, and I'll let him expand on that.
Well, what happened is the board of directors of the Friends of Oakley actually had a number of choices they could make as to where the radio station would go. My preference to them was that Donna DeBanco and her organization could help us, that we actually have her come in and give me additional advice as to who to reach out to and the like, and how to generate more community interest in the radio station. The Friends of Oakley, though, among the options that they had, chose to say, well, Tony, you're out of it. You're gone. We're going to give the project manager position to this Mr. Chris Ponsano, who had no radio experience against my 15 years in broadcasting and being on the board of directors.
So who made that decision, Kevin Romick or the board as a whole?
They made it in a meeting that was held after the meeting that we had. I wasn't in attendance at that meeting. How that actually came about should be in their records. But the decision, they sent me a letter afterwards saying, turn over all your resources. You're out of it.
It's not very nice.
Well, the thing is that typically speaking, and this is something that happens in the industry too, and I know the industry because I worked in the industry, that if you get a radio construction permit or if you get a license, it doesn't make any difference if you're working a nonprofit and the like. There is real money that is spent. There is real time that is spent to do that. It is customary in the radio business, if you get that and somebody else wants it or takes it, that you be compensated for it in some way. In some way. It shocked me. It shocked me that the Friends of Oakley said, all right, even though you got the construction permit, even though you put in all this time and resource, you can't have it, we're giving it to him. And again, it was against the custom in the industry to provide some type of recognition, some type of appreciation, and usually in the business some type of compensation for that.
But for you, it's not about the money and the recognition. Your ultimate goal was to make a community radio station, and I kind of want to use this word like a legacy to the community.
Yes, yes. I don't need to make money off a radio station. I'm doing okay. I wanted the community to have a voice. I've lived in the Oakland, or in the Oakley community, in the Brentwood community now for the better part of 13 years, and there's no voice here. There's nothing that allows people to say what they're thinking real time and be heard, and that's what I wanted, and that's what we're not getting.
Sure.
And the dream was taken away. One of the things that I would like to talk about is, Tony put himself through college working at radio stations back in the Midwest, and when he came out here, his dream was to start this radio station up and just basically give a gift to the local community of Oakley and Brentwood. And I can't tell you, as a friend of Tony's and a partner of him through this process, it was devastating to him.
Sure.
To have this thing just stolen from him, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
And so all this 3-year, 4-year buildup has kind of come ahead this last week or two.
Yeah.
With the illegal antenna placement, disgruntled employees finally coming forward, accusations that they won't show the books to the public, elected officials involved. We were talking kind of off the record earlier. When I say off the record, we weren't recording at the time. About elected officials involved in community radio?
Yeah, well, the FCC has an extremely dim view with politicians being involved in media sources, period. And with this being said, the Friends of Oakley took it upon themselves to take over and give the leadership of the radio station project to Chris. And we warned at the time, Tony and I met with Donna Logano and Kevin Romick, of the involvement. It is incumbent upon everybody to be aware that the Friends of Oakley are responsible for anything that is done with who represents that radio station, since they are currently the holders of that license.
Yeah.
I just want to hit on a couple more things.
Sure, go ahead, please. Please, yes.
With the antenna being placed at what we're being told is American Tower, it is the knowledge that we had that there was a security gate surrounding that. Chris Ponsano, from what the article stated, had the access code to that gate. One of the questions I have is, how did Chris get that code to gain access to the tower, if he's the one that went in and put it on, and who did he get it from?
Or a volunteer.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that the mayor of Antioch, whose name is Sean Wright, and the city council member of Oakley, who is also the president of the Friends of Oakley, is Kevin Romick, who are both politicians.
And related.
And they're related, are not supposed to be involved in media outlets. I think there's a need for an investigation, both into Sean and to Kevin, to find out their involvement in the planning process of taking this radio station away, and possibly look into what corrupt dealings may have taken place.
Not only in that respect, but an investigation as to the fundamental idea behind KLSN, what it was supposed to be and what it turned out to be. Since the time that Chris was given the project managership in 2014 till the time that he actually came on the air on January, 28th of 2017, I had stayed in contact with him for a while and received updates from him, although he sometimes very begrudgingly gave them. He finally told me, Tony, I don't want you being involved in this radio station at all. I don't want you to talk to my staff. I don't want you to see the inside of my facility. I don't want you to come to my meetings. This is my radio station. And I'm going to be putting on the shelf the concept of community radio in this radio station. I'd like to develop it into a sports station. I'd like to tell advertisers, not underwriters, but advertisers downtown, well, you know something, I've got this great radio station that you can advertise on. Sounds to me, what he did essentially was leave the concept of community radio and make this more into a commercial FM station, and many of those I've worked for before.
But that wouldn't fall under the FCC's original approval?
No, not, and that's, Gary brought up some wonderful points about what's happening with the antenna and the like, and FCC rules compliance and the like, but a huge fundamental issue also is that this is not supposed to be a sports radio station. This is not supposed to be something that goes after advertisers downtown to put money in. This is something that the community was supposed to support. This is something that the community was supposed to have some vested interest in. This was something that the community needed to have a voice in. From the time it went on the air in January of 2017, what have we heard about the community? What community involvement has there been? They brought on two very talented women to do a couple hours in the morning several times a week, but in listening, in listening, what we were supposed to have 6 to 8 hours a day according to FCC rules of community-based broadcasting every year, and we barely got a few moments. And again, we're talking 3.5 years down, maybe 3.5 years down the road of when we got this all started. Plenty of time to get this going, to bring the community in, to get the community to support it, and it never happened.
And I know for Gary, you were very passionate about bringing on a Hispanic segment each day or week, or...
Yeah, well, you know, it was in the planning stages, and Tony talks about community involvement, and also when he mentioned the dirty half dozen, if you will, the 6 individuals that we had together to kind of brainstorm what we were going to do. And I reached out for Alex Valdez. Alex is a very involved member of the Oakley community. He is Hispanic, and he had a conversation with Chris Ponsano some, I don't know, 2 years ago or thereabouts, wanting to initiate the opportunity to create a Hispanic broadcast station or show for Oakley and Brentwood. And Chris told him, and I am quoting Chris through Alex, that there will be no Hispanic broadcasting at KLSN as long as I'm in charge. And I just thought that was completely disturbing, and like Tony has stated, that it's going against everything that we wanted in the way of representing our community.
In all this, I take no pleasure, Mike. I take no pleasure in the fact that KLSN is having problems right now, or that this controversy is taking place. Ultimately speaking, what I'd like to see out of this is that the community radio station is returned to the community. That KLSN be given the opportunity again to develop its own board of directors, based on community interest, with community people involved in it, maybe some radio professionals, and there's a lot of them around here. To get into this, to actually steer the station back to what it was supposed to be, to what the FCC actually approved it to be, not to what it's become. Nobody, in a community radio station, nobody gets glory. You know, as far as that's concerned, it's just a lot of work. But the rewards aren't to an individual, but rather the rewards are to a community. And to think that one could go into this just to make money or fame or notoriety for himself or for a board of directors is repugnant.
Well, that's what's funny to me is that when I was approached to work with the radio station, it kind of was, I was doing all the giving and they were doing the taking, and it just wasn't a fair trade, and so I kind of politely turned it down at the time. But, you know, back to the whole antenna thing, that's what kind of has driven the controversy right now, and I'm with you. I think there needs to be an open investigation of how they got the antenna up there in the first place. I did reach out to Sean Wright, Antioch's mayor, last Thursday. He said that there was no handshake agreement, that there was no approval at that time. Instead, Sean had approached the city attorney to say, hey, what can we do? And the attorney basically said, stay out of it. There's no agreement. So from that point, how it got on the antenna, Sean, Sean says he had nothing to do with it.
And both Sean and Kevin may be completely immune from any liabilities, but I think it's worthy of getting to the bottom of it and getting an answer.
Yeah, and when I reached out to Chris in email, he basically said that it was a disgruntled employee that basically took it down. That doesn't really jive with what was written in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, he said, she said type of thing. So it'll be really interesting how it plays out. Anything else you guys want to add?
I would like to also make a request that the books for the Friends of Oakley and the books, if they exist for KLSN, be made available to myself and Tony, and we will be putting into written form that request. So
Yeah.
I want to see where the money was spent and who received the money.
Yes. There is an FCC rule that talks about the openness of books, of broadcast records and the like, that every radio station is supposed to have. Any interested party should be able to take a look at the records of the radio station, to the operating logs, and to all of this. I'm concerned, in listening to KLSN, and I did, while it was on the air, with respect to station IDs, with respect to the emergency action system, the emergency alert system that they're supposed to be broadcasting announcements for, that they operated actually without for a period of time when they first got started, in clear violation of FCC regulation. According to their engineer that spoke about that in the newspaper. I want transparency. I want this to be a community operation that everybody in the community not only knows about, but is able to participate in. And I want it to be the voice that it was originally, and I think very, very deservingly set out to be.
So what you kind of just said was interesting to me. And could the FCC technically take away the channel?
That's what I'm afraid of. We've already contacted the FCC about KLSN's operations. The difficulty is sometimes the FCC does withdraw licensing from stations like this, and the concern that I have is that we know that there's not going to be any further awards of LPFMs throughout the country, at least for the foreseeable future. The FCC has said this. What I'm afraid of is if their license is removed, or if action is taken against their license, that there will not be another radio station in Oakley. There will not be another radio station in Brentwood. And so, reasonably speaking, what needs to take place right now, I think the present board of directors needs to recognize that this is far beyond their capability to control. That this needs to be turned back over to a responsible group in the community, a responsible board of directors in the community to correct what the FCC may or may not find on this, to take a look at the operations in detail, and we have national consultants that will do that, to make sure that if we can get this station back on the air, that it gets back on the air in a proper way, consistent with FCC regulations and consistent with the design it originally had.
And for you, Gary,
I would like to make just my last and closing point is I want to make it perfectly clear to the community that with respect to all the comments that have been made on Facebook and any public media outlets, the articles that have been in the paper, we do not want this radio station to fail. We want the radio station to be up, running in a community-based fashion the way that Dr. Tony Van Goor had initially proposed.
And final question, Assemblyman Frazier helped bring it to the Friends of Oakley.
He did.
Is he aware of what's going on now, and is he involved in trying to rectify the issues?
I have made Jim Frazier aware of our avenues, what we are currently doing. What he is doing on his own, I am not sure of.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on. I know it's kind of a difficult topic, a very passionate topic for you. It hasn't been an easy 4.5 years doing this. I just think what you guys did in the very beginning was very admirable, very passionate. Just, it was all about the community and not for personal gain. So I really appreciate all your hard effort. Again, Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa Today. Please like, subscribe, follow. We'll see you again next time. Take care.